Good morning. In this video, we're going to look at how to simplify fractions. Whenever we're entering answers, we want our fractions to be in simplest form. That means that there are no common factors between the numerator and the denominator. There's no number that divides evenly into both 4 and 6, and so we're going to look at what that means. If I'm looking at the fraction 4/6, I'm trying to think of a number that if I divide it by 4, I get a whole number as a result. And then if I take that same number and I divide it by 6, I also get a whole number. I don't get a decimal answer, I get a whole number. And if you looked at a previous video that I made about divisibility rules, you can tell that if both the numbers are even, we know it's at least divisible by 2. Now there may be other, larger numbers other than 2 that it can divide evenly into, but we know for sure it can be simplified because they're both even and we can at least simplify it by 2. I'm going to divide the top number by 2 and the bottom number by 2. You have to divide, when you're simplifying fractions, you have to divide the top and the bottom number by the same number. And in this case, it's 2. And I'm writing it, I'm showing what I'm simplifying it by like this. If that's confusing, you don't have to write that part. Or if you want to show it a different way, it's just important to make sure that you're writing your notes so that you understand what you're doing or the steps that you've taken. We would say 4 divided by 2 is 2, and then 6 divided by 2 is 3. And we would get the fraction 2/3. And now there's no other number that divides evenly into both 2 and 3. And so I know that this is the simplest form, 2/3. For the second fraction, 12/36, they're both even. So I know I can at least simplify it by 2. So I know it can be simplified. But let's try to think if there's a larger number other than 2 that we could use to simplify this. So I'm thinking, I always try to start with a smaller number because there's less options, there's less factors for that number. So if I'm thinking about things that divide evenly into 12, and I want to look at something besides 2. So I might try 3 or 4. And if it's been a while since you've had to use your multiplication facts, or maybe you've forgotten them, this is where your calculator will come in handy. Now, if you're in my class, we can use a basic calculator. So I would just kind of look at what are some things that divide evenly into 12, right? And so again, if you've forgotten your multiplication, I'm just going to kind of guess and check. I'm going to say 12 divided by 3. Well, that comes out to be 4, right? Let me see if there's something larger. Maybe I try 6. Well, 6 works for 12, but remember it also has to work for the bottom number. So 12 divided by 6 works. Let me try if I can divide 36 by 6 and see if that will work. And it does. So that means I can reduce this fraction by 6. So I'm going to reduce the top and the bottom by 6. So 12 divided by 6 we said was 2, and then 36 divided by 6 is 6. And I got 2/6. Now, it's still not in simplest form. When we worked the first one, when I divided by 2, the fraction came out to be in simplest form. This one, it's still not in simplest form because they're both even. So I know I can at least divide it by 2 because they're both even. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide it by 2. I have to simplify it some more. So even if you simplify it once, you may have to simplify 2 or 3 times to get it down to simplest form. So I'm going to divide this by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now this would be in simplest form 1/3. All right, so when I was checking to see some things that were divisible by 12, 3 worked, 4 worked. It doesn't matter what number you simplify it by, as long as it is a factor, as long as you can divide it evenly into both the top number and the bottom number. So let's try it with a different number, just to see if we come out with the same thing. So I have 12 over 36. And let's look at, what if we would have chosen 4? Let's say I want to reduce this fraction by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. And again, this is where your calculator can come in if you're not, if you've forgotten multiplication, it's been a while, you can use your calculator. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. All right, so when I reduce the fraction by 4, I get 3/9. Now, these are not even numbers, so it's not divisible by 2, but I still need to check and make sure I can't simplify this even further. 3/9 can be reduced again by 3. 3 is divisible by 3. 9 is also divisible by 3. All right, so if they're not even, maybe try some different numbers other than 2 to check and see what you get. So I'm going to divide this by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So I get the same thing, right? So no matter what factors you're choosing, as long as they are a factor, you'll eventually get to the same answer. It just may take multiple steps. Now, if we would have, there is a larger number that will reduce this in one step. So let's look at that. We can reduce this fraction by 12. 12 divided by 12 is 1. Right, and then 36 divided by 12 is 3. If I'm going to reduce this fraction by 12, I'm going to get 36 divided by 12 was 3, so 1/3. If I choose the largest factor, or if I choose the largest number that divides evenly into the top and the bottom, then I just have one step. That's not always the first number we think of, and so a lot of times when we're reducing, we may have 2 or 3 steps. But it should always get you to the same answer, no matter what number you choose. And when we started out, it was even. So as long as it's even, both the numbers are even, you could just keep dividing it by 2 and eventually get to that same answer as well. As long as when you simplify, it comes out to be even numbers. And then let's look at our last one, 7 over 21. Now again, these are odd numbers, so I can't use my rule that they're both even, so I can reduce by 2. And, if you're not really sure what goes into 7, what divides evenly into 21, this is where we just look at some guess and check with our calculator, or we think about our multiplication facts. The only thing that divides evenly into 7 are 1 and 7, right? There's not, those are the only factors of 7. So those are the only things that we could choose from, otherwise it would be in simplest form. So let's see if I can divide 21 by 7. And it does come out evenly. So I could reduce this fraction by 7. And remember, whatever we divide the top by, we have to divide the bottom by, and they both have to come out evenly in order for it to simplify. So 7 divided by 7 is 1, and 21 divided by 7 is 3. So we get 1/3. Right? So even though they're odd numbers, you may think, I'm not really sure what divides evenly into those numbers. Again, that's some guess and check with your calculator. It's helpful, like I said earlier, if you start with a smaller number, because there are going to be less factors. There's not as many numbers that divide evenly into the smaller one. It may not always work like that, but that can be helpful sometimes to start with a smaller number and go from there. So that's why I looked at the factors of 7 first instead of 21. I did make a video that talks about some of the divisibility rules that can help when you're looking at numbers or factors of these numbers to help you simplify these fractions. Learning your multiplication facts, that's always helpful. Just refreshing on those. And then again, you know, if you're not sure, we can always use our calculator to help us guess and check.